Kisah seorang mualaf Kristian Katolik berketurunan Meksiko yang menjumpai Islam di gereja. Meksiko ialah sebuah negara majoriti penduduknya beragama Kristian Katolik. Budaya hidup rakyat adalah mengikut fahaman Kristian, tetapi dari segi agama, bolehlah dikatakan mereka beragama hanya pada nama kerana tidak mengamalkan ajaran agama di rumah.
My name is Alma Campos. I am a Mexican-American convert. Okay, so I was born and raised in a Mexican family, and typically what happens when you come from a Mexican family is we're Catholic. So the Catholic faith is really tied into the Mexican culture. So culturally, this is what I was, but religiously, we never really followed Catholicism in my home. When I was little, I must have been maybe 4 or 5, my mom would always say, like, God is watching you, God is watching you. But yeah, so we were raised as Catholics. And so I remember being raised just with the idea of God and never fully understanding the concept of Jesus, but just feeling like I have to believe in him. He's part of this, but it never really made sense to me. So as I was growing up, sometimes I would go to church, and I have to be honest, I never really gave the Catholic religion a lot of study, not until I became a Muslim. I think when I started studying Islam and really questioning a lot of these things, I started to focus a lot on what does Catholicism teach us. So I started to study that more when I started studying Islam.
Perjalanan menuju Islam bagi Alma Kempes bermula di tempat yang paling tidak disangka. Beliau terkesan dengan tingkah laku rakan sekolah yang duduk di sebelahnya semasa di gereja.
During our time in the school, we had to attend Mass. And one of the things that you do during Mass is you do the sign of the cross. During Mass, the person sitting next to me didn't do the sign of the cross. And I was just thinking, why did she not do this? When we were at Mass, and this person didn't do it, I remember feeling like, oh my God, what is this? This is so strange. Why isn't she doing the sign of the cross? What does this person believe in? And that started a conversation, and she started to explain that she was Muslim. She was not very practicing. There was nothing that would show me that she was different from any of us. But that conversation opened up my eyes to there's other religions out there. She would start to talk to me about the oneness of God. The position that Jesus has within this religion. And we would talk about the afterlife, which was a curiosity that I had had since forever. We would talk about, the creation of the world, and we would talk about different prophetic stories. And I started to realize that innately, the things that I had believed in since I was a child really fell into the things that she was telling me. Yeah, but the biggest question for me, the big one, was God, the concept of God.
Meskipun menyedari agama asal yang dianuti mempunyai pelbagai keraguan, namun Alma masih tertutup hati untuk berubah.
When I was a child, it was like, this is how I believe, but this is what we are. And it doesn't fit. It doesn't go with this. But I have to still be Catholic. But it just never fit. So it took me to a place where I understood that there's more that I have to study and learn and whatnot, because this wasn't the only option that we had, or the only option that existed, I should say. I was just trying to be part of the group because of the family I was born into, my cultural background and stuff like that. And those conversations slowly but surely led me to learn a little bit more. For me, it was a lot of questioning and investigating and confirming for myself. But at the end, I always kept coming back to Islam and what I was learning. And as a young kid, because again, I was in high school, and I kept finding myself thinking, well, again, I'm Mexican. I was born into my beautiful family. This is who we are. That's who you are. So it's great. It's beautiful. I respect it. I believe it, but this is for you guys. This is us. My mind was kind of closing that option of having that be something for me. I don't know why, but it just was closing that as an option for me. And that happened for many years.
Walaupun tiada kejadian yang menyentuh jiwa, namun akhirnya Alma rasa minat terhadap Islam bertambah mendalam. Dia berasa kagum dengan rakan Muslim yang dia kenal.
Without even consciously being aware, I was falling in love with this religion. And it's something I didn't know. I found myself studying it, and I realized at one point that it's been penetrating in my heart. And it wasn't one thing that happened and I said, oh, this is the truth. It was by the time I realized I was in love with this Islam. This is my journey, how it happened with me. I had a lot of Muslim friends who were not practicing, and one thing that I really respected about them is that even though they were not practicing, they were very clear about saying what is right and what is wrong within their religion. They wouldn't try to justify any mistakes that they were making. And this, for me, I was like, I really respect that. I respect that they're so firm on what they believe, even if it's against themselves. So for me, I was impressed by that.
Sampai waktunya hidayah Allah, Alma berusaha untuk bertemu dengan Muslim yang arif.
Then I said, maybe it's time for me to start finding some more information, finding a class or something, just to revisit this idea of Islam. And I coordinated with a friend of mine to go to the masjid. It was a Saturday or Sunday morning. We said we're going to go to the masjid. So that morning, subhanAllah, like if anything was ever going to change my life, it was that day. So that morning, we stepped into the masjid, and there was a man that was there, and we started a conversation. And he started asking me, what do I know about Islam? So I started to tell him I've been studying it for a while. I've been fasting now for a couple of years. I had already by that time stopped eating pork. I had stopped anything that had alcohol in it. And so I was implementing all of these little things as I was learning just because they made sense to me. It seemed like the right thing to do and I would do it. So then he started asking me the articles of faith. He started asking me, do you believe in the one God? Do you believe that Jesus is a prophet? Do you believe in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And I kept answering yes to everything. And so that's when he asked me why haven't I took Shahada. And so then he pretty much told me something that remained with me till this day, is something that I tell people. We don't know what tomorrow might bring. We don't know what could happen to us once we leave this room.
Hasil dari perbualan dengan Muslim tersebut, Alma mendapat kesedaran terhadap pendiriannya yang salah. Dia tahu Islam itu benar, tetapi masih tidak memeluk Islam adalah seperti menafikan Allah.
Like saying, I agree with what Islam says, or I think that this is part of the Muslim faith. If this is what you believe, then to not declare the Shahada is denying your creator, right? So immediately I understood, wow, I believe in this. Like, it's in my heart. I know that I believe this. And to not do it is to say, like, I'm rejecting my creator. I'm rejecting God. And that was very powerful for me. Like, I felt like I couldn't do that. And I don't have a choice. So I went and I took my Shahada. And it was a beautiful moment that I didn't really value until much later. And that's when my journey began as a Muslim.
Keluarga mengetahui pengislaman Alma secara tidak sengaja, tanpa perlu dia menceritakan apa-apa.
The way my family found out, I don't think they remember this, but I remember. We all went out to dinner, and we were sitting in this restaurant, and they were talking about my wedding. So my dad was saying when Alma gets married, and this beautiful church, and walking her down the aisle, and it was a lot of these plans that my dad had for my wedding. Then my mom turns around and said, that's not going to happen. And so my dad obviously reacted, and he said, why would that not happen? And she said, because your daughter's Muslim. So I started eating a little bit faster. She saw me praying. I think she saw me praying in my room, and then she made the connection that I had already taken my Shahada and became a Muslim. So they were very respectful of the choices that I had made. They were okay. They thought it might be a phase. They were fine. They were trying to see how Islam might change me, what was going to be different about me after becoming a Muslim. I think most of the changes that they saw were positive, so they were okay with that.
Meskipun dalam Kristian, Mother Mary sering memakai hijab, tetapi bagi budaya Kristian, memakai hijab oleh orang kebanyakan adalah sesuatu yang aneh. Ini menjadi satu cabaran bagi Alma untuk memakai hijab, sehinggakan dia tidak mahu ambil tahu langsung mengenai aturan berhijab.
Now that I look back, when I was reading into Islam, I'm sure that anytime I came across a page discussing hijab, I would just flip that page. Like, I didn't want to know. It was something that I didn't want to do. It was something that was so foreign to everything that I had known as myself. Like, nobody in my family ever wore hijab. Hijab was just very, very far from anything I ever wanted to do at that time. And this happened for a while. I tried to dress more modest, more long sleeves and this and stuff. That was relatively easy, but putting something on my head was very difficult. It was the concept, the idea of it was very difficult for me. And it took me a while. After studying more and more about Islam, I had to really reflect on why I had this rejection for hijab. I had to really reflect, why was I so against the idea of even learning about it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear examples about it. Why was it so strong in me? And I came to the conclusion that this was something in me. It wasn't my religion. It wasn't Islam that was doing something wrong or oppressive or unjust. Because at that time, my mind would only understand that it is oppressive. It's not nice. You're asking me to cover because of a man so that they can lower their gaze? Let them learn to lower their gaze. My idea was just, you're asking me to do this for somebody else? That's not fair. And why are all of these Muslim brothers walking around with nothing that identifies them as Muslim? There's nothing. I won't know that they're Muslim, but you want me to wear a hijab? I had that. So after some time, I started studying and just reading into it very privately because I wanted nobody's input or any pressure into wearing my hijab. And I don't remember what it was exactly, but I know there was a lecture that I had listened to. And it really convinced me when I understood I'm not wearing it for anybody else except because Allah is asking me to do this. And if everything that I have researched and looked into so far has made sense, has had a point, has been there for good, then why am I not going to do this? I should do that. So I started wearing it only to please Allah, understanding there is good in this for me. And after I started wearing it, that's when I really saw how impactful it has been in my life. So I understood the way that I would engage in conversations, the way that people would engage me, the way it protected me. So there's one time when I was in Mexico, I was traveling with my family, and it was my parents, my kids, my husband. We were all just doing the touristy things in Mexico City. And we came to this building. It's a government building, and I'm wearing hijab. So the man tells me, well, you can't come in. You have to take that off. So obviously I said, I can't. This is a religious wear. How am I supposed to take it off? And he says, I'm sorry, you can't come in. You have to take it off. No hats, no this, no that. And so my immediate response was like, do you believe in Mary? And then he said, yeah. So I was like, hello, remember Mary? I'm dressing like Mary and you're not going to let me in? And then he was like, okay, just go in and go. But when you really study this religion and you see the way that it honors women, I think that for me, I was completely impressed by that. I was taken back to understand the way that women were treated, even at the time of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously starting at the time of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So before coming to Islam, I absolutely had this misconception that it was a religion that oppressed women. And after studying it and living it, I can guarantee that it is not.